Yay, we hit 100.
Whoa.
Cool. I think it's stabilizing at exactly 100. Oh, never mind. All right, cool. Let's just get started. Hey guys, welcome to Design Thinking in 45 Minutes. We are really excited to be here today, and we'll just do a quick introduction of ourselves. So my name is Yoon, or I go by Kiyoon. I'm currently a fellow at IDEO as well as a design lead at a startup called Forage.
Hi guys, I'm Dorothy, and right now I'm a designer at Microsoft working on Windows.
So before we get started, we want to give you a little refresher on exactly what is design thinking.
Yeah, so if you go to the next slide, this is a summary of the design thinking process. So most of the industry uses this process to develop new products and services. So what design thinking is a human-centered process for solving problems and innovating. So human-centered means starting with the end user to identify their needs and problems and then tailor our solutions towards them. There's 6 steps to this process: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, and implement. And they generally flow in this order, but in reality, it's never this linear. Most of the time, these stages are happening kind of in parallel, where you take insights from one stage and then go back to revise something that you previously thought. So for example, like sometimes you learn about users through testing and you go back to ideate some more solutions. And then sometimes testing will reveal new problem areas to define. But following this process will generally help you ground your solutions to the actual customer need and validate them with the people that you're serving before you ship it. So really quick summary, like just jumping into each of these stages. So empathize is learning about your audience. This like conducting research to identify the user needs and business opportunities, and then also gain an understanding of the problem space. So empathizing is the very first step of being human-centered. You start by learning about the people you're actually solving for, and then push aside your own assumptions. So some of the tools that we use to do this are just observing people in their natural environment, and try stepping in their shoes, conducting interviews to ask them how they do things and why. Also, like looking at existing research, there's a lot out there, and that includes like psychological and just user research. And then finally, like creating user personas, which are like character cards representing your users that ground you to your customer. The next step, define, is all about consolidating the info that you've gathered in the last stage and synthesizing them into problem areas. So you try to find patterns in the data and then organize them into problem statements that are based in these user needs. So what this looks like in practice is you could create affinity diagrams, which is when you write down the key learnings from research on sticky notes and lay them all out and group the related ones together to try to find connections between them. Jobs to be done are identifying what actions users are trying to complete when they interact with your product. And then today we're going to lead you through like the how might we process of defining problems, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. The next stage, ideate, this is the most fun stage. This is when we tell the team to pass off all your judgment and go crazy with thinking up ideas. So it doesn't matter if they're horrible or completely unreasonable. The goal is to just think of as many solutions as possible. And when we ideate, the room isn't only full of designers. This isn't only a design process. We usually bring in devs and PMs and anybody else who can bring in like different perspectives to the problem that we're solving. And at the very end, we refine the ideas and discover that we have a lot of like good nuggets of information that we can continue to pursue. So the tools of this stage include different ways to brainstorm by using sticky notes, wireframing, mind mapping to gather and organize ideas. So the next stage, prototyping, now that you have the ideas, the next step is actually draw it out. But actually building out the idea is super iterative. We never want to ship the first solution that we designed because there are probably things that we missed or assumptions we've made about our users. So we want to go and bring our solutions to them to test it. We also don't want to waste our time. So prototyping is all about building these scrappy, scaled down versions of the product that we can run experiments on, get feedback quickly, and then refine. So some tools are just like drawing user journeys, stitching out flows together, trying to create like an end-to-end experience. InVision and Figma are design tools that offer quick ways to do this, to link together the interactions that you've drawn out. And then sometimes when the product is further along, devs will step in and help us like code up like quick like HTML, like scrappy pages, just to make the experience feel as close to the real experience we want to build. So the next step, test, this is closely tied to prototyping and ideating. So this is one example of something that usually happens in parallel. So as you draw out your solutions, you'll uncover a lot of unanswered questions about your user and their behavior. You realize that you start making like assumptions about them that you want to like validate. And so we conduct user research to test the prototypes that we've created. And so we do this to make sure our solution is headed in the right direction, to see how people actually interact with the flows that you draw out, and maybe identify new problem areas and get their feedback before you ship it. So most of the tools in this stage are handled by user researchers, and they conduct like user studies or in-person interviews. But sometimes if you want feedback, like you could also just like call your mom or like talk to your friends or whatever for some quick feedback. The final stage, so it's implement. So once you have your design solution finalized, this stage is all about just handing off your design to get coded up. So this is about creating a spec that provides devs with the key properties of your designs, like a lot of like the HTML, CSS elements, and a lot of tools these days like Figma have some auto specking features that help you. So this process ends up being a lot faster, but even after you hand off your designs to the dev, there's a lot of like kind of dev constraints that come up throughout the process. So you're always in constant communication with them. So if you go to the next slide, today's design thinking workshop is going to focus primarily on the first 3 steps of this process. So I'm going to hand it over to Yoon to kick us off with the activity.
All right, let's put this in practice. Okay, so I want to make sure that everyone is in their teams, and that you're in a separate call with your teams throughout the process, because this will be a very interactive, lot of going to be kind of like, how do we do the first 3 steps of design thinking in like about 30 minutes. So for some context of what the problem we're going to be solving today is that we're in an unprecedented time today. The quarantine in response to COVID-19 has placed everyone inside, and frankly, things are extremely different, especially for schools, right? So let's brainstorm some solutions around our upcoming future. So in order to get that started, in the Zoom chat, I'm going to be dropping a Figma link, if Zoom will let me. So I need one person from each team to go into that link, make a copy of that Figma file, and then and invite everyone else onto it, because that'll be your team board throughout this entire process. If you're having trouble, please feel free to message me on Slack or Zoom. I'm currently monitoring those chats. I'll give everyone about 2-ish minutes to get set up. And on Zoom, if you can give me a thumbs up reaction when you're ready. I'm seeing if I can see the thumbs up reactions.
Also, if you don't have a team, it's okay to do this by yourself too. This is something that we can do with a group or by yourself.
Woo! We have so many people. Oh, okay. So how you make a copy of this Figma file is you go click on the little hamburger button on the left, on the top of the toolbar where like the mouse button and the frames are. There's like a little hamburger button. You click on that, you go to File, and there is. Oh wait, no, I lied. I lied. How do you do this? This is not good. I just went because it's mine, actually. Or if you open it and then go to the main Figma page, if you right click on like the IDEATE design thinking on like your recently viewed, there's something called duplicate. That everyone's got it. I see people dragging. I'll give it another like 30 seconds or so. Cool. So if you look on the left side, there are different pages that I've created for each of the stages. So it should, let me show you my screen. So on the Figma, so here's like who should be designed for and things over here on the side. In case people are also not just when you're making copies, you basically would open this and then click on this over here, and then you can right click on this and press duplicate. So let's hope that that kind of helped. So right now we're going to go to the who should we design for page and think about, think about who should we design for? So let's brainstorm about some solutions around our upcoming future. So on the slide, you get on the Figma itself, you get some sticky notes. Over here, you'll see some sticky notes. You won't be able to edit the master file because they should only have view access, but on your team board, let's take the next 5 minutes to come up with people who might be affected by the current situations today. And you can be at, and try to think of it not too broad, but not too specific. And it sounds really confusing, but once you start kind of generating people, you'll start to get a little bit of feel of it. So I'll give you guys about 5-ish minutes, 5 to 6 minutes to start thinking about who should we design for. And if you guys have any questions during the process, feel free to drop the questions in Zoom chat or Slack or anywhere. So Sanika, what you want to do is after you open the file, go into the little F button over here, and then you right click on the file and you press duplicate.
Yeah, if you click the drop down arrow like next to where it says IDEATE 2020 design thinking 45 minutes on the top, that also gives you an option to duplicate. Sorry, like in drafts in the center, Yoon.
Oh yeah, right here. Right. You can duplicate it here. That's what I was looking for. Importance of UX UI.
Oh, fuck.
All right, another 30 seconds. Cool, and we are back. So if anyone wants to, so let's take the next 30 seconds from within your team to vote on one specific audience to design for. So you might have come up with like 10 or 20-ish people that you could have think of. Narrow that down to where one favorite person in the next 30 seconds. Another 10. Cool. So does anyone want to share what audience they thought about? We'll get like two or three. Also, sorry if I'm looking off the side. I'm looking at your beautiful faces on the other screen that I have set up. Anyone want to share the audience that they will be designing for?
We got international students in the chat. Feel free to post in the chat too.
Yeah, feel free to post it on the chat. Actually, let's do it that way. Ooh, unemployed. That's an interesting group. Let's get like one or two more. People who can no longer afford housing and are being evicted, people with mental health problems, depression, anxiety, day-to-day mask users. All right, I'm really excited to see where this will land. So let's move on to the next step, which should be the next page on your Figma file, is what problems do they face? So let's brainstorm around some solutions around the upcoming future. So some examples of that. Let's see if I can find any. So if you're for a given problem space, for example, let's say if you're a student, right? So the upcoming problem space that you can see might be the fact that you can't go on campus anymore. It's hard to get in-person interaction. The social aspect of education is missing, or the in-person social interaction per se, right? So kind of thinking about what are some of like the bottlenecks, some of the problems that the group that you chose are facing, given the context of the situation of what was happening right now. So let's take about another 5 minutes to think about just what problems do they face, and list them out.
Yeah, and just kind of building on that, generally in this stage of the design process, we usually try to identify problems like based on data. But for the sake of this brainstorm, we're kind of just making assumptions for now. That's totally okay, but just be kind of cognizant of like the assumptions you're making about these groups of people too. Sometimes in the design thinking process, like we do make these assumptions initially, and then we go and validate these assumptions later on. So um,
Another 2-ish minutes. All right, let's take 30 seconds to put in like kind of your last ideas. All right, so now let's take about another 30 seconds to pick out your two favorite ideas. Are the two favorite problems that your team wants to solve around for the audience that you have chosen. So I'll give you guys another 30 seconds to make that decision. And as soon as you make that decision, feel free to type it on the chat and I'll just read it out.
Yeah, in the chat, why don't we say the people you're designing for first and then dash the problem, like one problem that they're facing.
All right, show me some problems. Colleges and the difficulty of contact tracing large amounts of people. Ooh. Working parents. The pandemic has turned many working parents into homeschool teachers. Many of them don't have resources, information, or time to be effective teachers. Let's get like two more. These are all great. Loneliness, lack of in-person relationship as an impact on mental health. That's a good one. And let's get one more. Facilitating the application process for college students. Ooh, first gen college students. Cool. So the next step is now we have these problems, and now we want to formulate them into questions that we can answer, and we call that process the how might we. So in order to start brainstorming for solutions, we need questions to answer, and we formulate these questions through forming how might we statements. So how might we statements are usually formed as how might we enable a user group to do a problem, like to do something to the problem to be solved while providing the context of where the situation is in. So for example, let's say let's go with the working parents, right? A lot of them can't afford childcare. They can't go to childcare anymore. So now they're double working as a parent and also as an employee. So how might we enable working parents to manage childcare while also performing regularly at their job? So that would be kind of an example of how you might formulate a how might we. So what is a good how might we? First one is that it can't be too broad to lose focus. And second one is not too narrow to constrain the thinking idea to be in a cage. So basically, it's going to be a fine balance. As you build more how might we's, you will feel that if it's too broad or too narrow. So I'll just say, just take it, just give it a shot and see how it goes. So let's take another. I think we have 12 minutes left, so let's take about 5 minutes to think about what question should we answer.
Also, just to elaborate on like how narrow or broad the statement should be, solutions. So if you can only think of like one solution, end it up. Too broad is like it might be hard to like find like a concrete solution that you would want to go tackle. So just kind of think about that balance.
Also, for the sake of time, I apologize. We'll give it another minute or so to finalize some of your Hat My Wees. All right, let's wrap up your last How Might We in the next 30 seconds. And if you're done kind of thinking about your How Might We's, go ahead and your teams to vote on your favorite How Might We to answer. So just one, you're going to choose one How Might We because that's the question that's going to go into the brainstorming. And when you have decided that How Might We, feel free to share it in the Zoom chat. I think this session will be recorded. I think we should be able to share the slides. So we'll let you know.
Yeah, we can post the slides in the channel, assuming Dorothy and y'all are okay with them like having access to slides.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it should be fine. Cool. So let me see some How Might We's. Anyone want to share? How might we provide accessible mental health services for international students? That's a very good one. I personally really like that one. Let's get like one more. Who will be the hero? How might we create a process to finding remote resources more accessible and streamlined for students transitioning to remote learning? Great. So we got some great how might we's. So the next one is how should we solve those problems? So this is where it's fun. It's going to be the brainstorming. Here are some tips. First one is there are no bad ideas. So let your creativity run wild. Don't dismiss an idea just because you think it's dumb. Leave the judgment at the door. Don't pass on the weird ones. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. We'll refine and calibrate it to the real world later. It's not but and. So think of ideas in continuation instead of mutually exclusive. And always stay on focus. So don't drift. You have limited time, so make the most of it. And make sure there's only one conversation at a time when it's happening. When you're discussing about your brainstorm ideas, don't talk over each other and listen to every idea. A picture is also worth 1,000 words. Feel free to get creative to draw out some of the things that you have in your mind instead of just describing it verbally. And for now, quantity over quality. We want a lot of ideas really quick and fast. So that being said, you will have 3 minutes to come up with as many ideas as you want, and then another 30 seconds after that to choose on your favorite idea. So go ideate. Cool. Let's take another 30 seconds to wrap up your last brainstorm ideas. And you guys can now go ahead within your teams to choose your favorite idea that you want to pursue if this were to be your next project that you're working on. So I'll give you guys another 30 seconds to do that. And this time, don't tell us what you're going to build or what you finalized on, but just send a +1 text on the chat when you guys are ready to move on. All right, another 15 seconds. I didn't see any +1, so I'm assuming everyone is still discussing. Cool. So I see a +1. I see +1s now. Great. So I'm gonna take that as gonna be safe to move on. Try to finalize what idea you guys are pursuing. While I kind of go over to what the next step is. So next step is making your back to reality, schools in a month. So if you were to start working on the solution tomorrow, what would you build? It's the time to make your ideas concrete. So it says 10 minutes, but we're going to make it actually 5 minutes. So on the last page, it should be a kind of a A4 framework on Figma that I set up so that you can make a quick one-page ad. The thing that I have is very bare bone. So feel free to go crazy over it, add cool images, like all kinds of things. And yeah, try to spend like 5 minutes preparing a quick one-pager ad for your solution. Cool. Let's take the 30 seconds to finalize it, and then to go to Slack and join the channel. I try to add as many people as possible while trying to running on my toaster. But it's called Design-Thinking-Workshop. So you can just join that channel and drop your beautiful ads in there. I am looking forward to seeing them. And let's take another minute or two to do that.
Just a little bit of logistics, I guess, while y'all are submitting those. We have our next workshop starting at 2:20 Eastern time, and that's with Megan Woodruff, and it's an intro to Figma. I think it'll be really great, especially if you haven't used Figma before or you're a beginner to it. And yeah, just make sure to join that once we finish up with this workshop.
Cool. So we're going to assume that you guys are still working on your ads and working on sharing your ads. And for the sake of time, we'll move on to you're done. The congrats, guys. This is kind of real crash course on design thinking in 45 minutes. I just realized my slides have 2 views, so I'll fix that. And yeah, so you're done, but also this is just the beginning, right? Design is about iterating and improving. So where will you go from here? We're really excited to know. Hopefully this process can be implemented during your school projects or your everyday life. That's what IDEATE was designed around. Yeah, Dorothy, do you want to do a
Yeah,
quick summary of what we did?
I just wanted to kind of frame kind of what we did in terms of the design thinking process. So what we did was like we empathized with a group of people. We tried to step in their shoes and identify problems that they might be facing. And then we started thinking about how we can use design to solve these problems and how might we, as one of many different frameworks that we can use to try to start framing the problem in a way that we can create solutions for. So again, this was very like quick and dirty. We didn't have that much time. Apologies if you guys felt rushed, but we will send you this deck afterwards. This is like a good reference point to start thinking about using the design thinking process.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you. So Dorothy and I'll stay on the call. If you have any questions, we'll have a free Q&A session. So feel free to send the questions in the Zoom chat and we'll be more than happy to answer.
Yeah.
So we'll be here for about like 10-ish minutes.
Just wanted to.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks to Dorothy and Yoon. They actually founded IDEATE back in 2016. So it is super cool to have them back here as workshop leaders. So thank y'all for an amazing workshop. And yeah, feel free to head over to, I think it's IDEATE 3 is the Zoom link. So learn more about Figma there or stay here and ask more questions. Yeah, thanks y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you have any questions, we're still here. So you can either unmute and ask, or you can post it on the chat if you're a little too shy.